there is a very old religious insistence that pride is a cardinal sin and that humility is the virtue that counters pride. And then you have to ask, well, what does it mean? What does humility mean? And it means something like admission of ignorance.
Yeah.
But what's so useful about that and why it's a virtue and why it's something very useful to practice is that if you do admit to your ignorance, which is to note what you don't know and to dare ask it, then you immediately rectify. I told my daughter, for example, very straightforwardly, you only have to ask a stupid question once if you listen to the answer, right? So she's been in many situations where, she was in over her head, like we all are.
Yes,
very often.
Like me today.
Well, and it's very tempting to pretend that you know and to not ask the stupid question. But first of all, almost everybody around who's participating, let's say, in the conversation has the same stupid question. And second, if you don't ask it, well, then you remain stupid. So that's not helpful. And
and I think this was a great lesson of, like a lot I've learned about parenthood and about having this same approach with your children. I mean, and I've seen you with Julian up close of, being genuinely interested, but offering choices and listening and caring as a parent. And so, I didn't have children at this point, but I have a room full of 28-year-olds that are bright, and we can explore life together in entrepreneurship and how you make money and what it means if you make money. And that ended up being, I spent quite a time at the University of Texas. We built up the entrepreneurship program. We won all sorts of awards, and then spun off our own business school.
Why was it well received, do you think? And why was it also, it's two things, eh?
Yeah.
It was well received by the students, but obviously it was also well received by the administrations.
It was well received, and you know enough about academia. The teachers, so the professors who were teachers loved us. What we did, though, is we had a very firm, very hard contract of what was required to be in the class. We graded on a forced curve when everyone else gave all A's. The harder we made the program, the more people we attracted. And so, but at some point, I think our teachers, who were all entrepreneurs who had been successful, so all adjuncts, won the Teacher of the Year award 11 out of 11 years.
And how big a group was that?
Well, there were 141 professors. And our group of 8 were teaching 25% of all the elective hours in the school as adjuncts.
Wow, as adjuncts.
And so
being paid nothing.
Yes, so you can imagine what happens next in this story.
Yeah, right.
Right? So we're basically all fired or we all quit, depending on which story you want.
Yeah.
But we go start our own school. And we focus on...
When was this?
This would have been 2000.
And I see. And so that was after 8 years?
Yes.
8 years. And what was the rationale for the firing/quitting?
Probably that I was too disagreeable, which was fair. But I will say I got a call from inside the school from someone, and he said, look, a tenured professor, and he said, look, I have to tell you, they're going to fire half of you this summer and the other half at Christmas. And we were at that point attracting more than half of all the students to the school and teaching a quarter of them. And they said they just, the tenured political faculty just doesn't want you here. So we decided we were going to teach one last class off campus across the street from the campus. And 130 people showed up for no credit. They drove from Waco, from Houston to Austin, from Dallas to Austin. So they came from all over, including faculty from those schools. And we thought, you know what? Maybe we should have our own MBA program.
Right.
Now, we knew nothing about that was impossible, right? No one ever told us you couldn't get a credit. But we managed to build a program. We ended up winning all sorts of awards from Princeton Review with really Navy SEALs, Olympic athletes, and young entrepreneurs. And we built this 100-hour-a-week, 10-month program that was just brutal, but changed our lives and changed the lives of the students.
So that was right after you were at the University of Texas?
Yeah. We were fired, and it was right. The next thing we did was have this free class. And the next thing after that was launch our own MBA program.
And so what was the rationale for dispensing with you guys? I mean, it must have been somewhat difficult given the fact that, it was half the students, it was very popular.
Yeah, there was an outcry, but as the dean put it to the students at that point, you are not our customers. Our customers are the pursuit of scholarly knowledge. And so your opinion doesn't really matter, was what they were told. So anyway, we spun off. It was successful. It was a lot of fun. And really, I'm now, still doing some business things, mostly teaching. This program's a lot of fun. And then we come to kind of one of the most important things in my life, and that is our 2 young boys are in Montessori school. And they're just about...
So you had them after you left the University of Texas
Yes.
and started this now independent program.
Right. So this
you
is...
didn't have accreditation for the independent program?
We did get accreditation.
We did?
We managed to get accreditation because we won all these awards and they had to give us accreditation.
And who awarded you accreditation?
SACS. We had SACS accreditation through a small university that my great-grandfather had been president of at the turn of the century.
And SACS is?
Oh, the Southern Accrediting Association. So it's one of the regional accreditors.
Right, so you got associated with a small college, but
Right.
it didn't matter because
Right.
as long as you have accreditation,
Right.
you have accreditation.
Right.
Right. And so accreditation was set up so that, in principle, so that there was some, what would you say, consistency, reliability, and validity to the assignation of a degree. I mean, that's the theory.
Well, that's the theory. What it really serves as, of course, is a protection of the cartel.
Right,
I mean, it's not really that, but we managed to get it. Wasn't an issue, and we built the program. By then, I've got these two children, Charlie and Sam, and they're about to leave from Montessori to get ready to go to elementary school. So I go to see the very best teacher in the very best middle school in Austin that's teaching our daughter, who's older. And I said, when should we move the boys into regular school? And I'll never forget this gentleman was an African-American. He looked like Abraham Lincoln, tall, stately, and he said, as soon as possible. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, once they've had that kind of freedom, they won't want to be chained to a desk for 8 hours a day and talk to them.
So get them in chains young.
And I was kind of stunned. And I said, well, I don't blame him. I just blurted that out. And he looked down at the ground for the longest time. And he looked up and he had tears in his eyes and he shook his head very quietly and he said, I don't either. So I went home that day and I told Laura, I said, I don't know if we're going to homeschool. I don't know if we're going to start a school. But our boys, the best teacher in this town, just told me not to put them in traditional school. So we're going to do something else.
Do you know Paul Gotti?
No.
Okay, Gotti, I hope I have his name right. He was Teacher of the Year in New York State a number of years. And he died, unfortunately. I wanted to interview him, but that was never possible. Yeah. He was no admirer of the current education system, let's say. And he wrote a history of the education system, which was extremely interesting. He pointed out that the public education in the United States, I was investigating this because I was wondering why our school systems are so bad at fostering individual vision.
Yes.
Because it's such a lack. I thought, why? This is such a lack. There's something going on here. Okay. The Prussians established the first public education system. And the reason they did it was because the Prussian emperor wanted to produce obedient soldiers, disciplined, obedient soldiers. Now, I don't want to get cynical about that because in a society that requires a military, disciplined people who can follow rules are arguably necessary. Now, obviously, that can go very badly, but we got to give the devil his due. And the Prussians actually put forward a very effective military training system. Now, that was adopted in the United States in the late 1800s by industrialists, mostly, self-proclaimed fascists. So at that time, of course, it wasn't Mussolini, Hitler, like fascism. It was far the early precursors of that, but they were people who believed that the state and the corporate world could integrate at the highest levels, and there might be some utility in that, which is a very dubious claim, but nonetheless. So they knew that all sorts of rural people were pouring into the cities to start working in factories. Their kids needed to be cared for while they worked, and then their kids were likely to have factory jobs. And so the purpose of the public education system, and this is why there's rows of desks and factory bells and this insistence on timing, was to produce disciplined, obedient workers, certainly not to produce people who were autonomous. And that was adopted in the US. The Japanese adopted it and militarized like mad, and part of the consequence of that was the outbreak of the Second World War. And but that being chained to a desk, that's not a bug. That was a feature. Right. And you can also even say, well, let's give it some credence. A rural worker, their time schedule is much less stringent than someone who's going to work on a factory.
Right, they're on an agrarian farm, they're on a farm,
You're much looser in your time sense, and it is the case that industrialization requires clock.
Yes.
And so you have to give the devil his due, but in a somewhat post-industrial world, which is what we're in now, it's not obvious at all that obedient worker / soldier is the right model for human development.